Robert's Rebellion is undoubtedly the most iconic conflict in the history of Westeros, primarily due to it serving as the backdrop for the main series A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. It reshaped the continent as we know it, and overall it is crucial to the story as it progresses, but it is not the most recent war as of the start of the series. That honor goes to the Greyjoy Rebellion, a conflict with far smaller scope, but with large implications not only on Westerosi politics in general, but on the characters who later serve as the backbone of our core story. Because Robert's Rebellion could have been a one off. It could have been a miraculous event where this 300-year-old dynasty just collapsed under its own weight, and then Robert just happened to come into power. The Greyjoy Rebellion is when Robert Baratheon proved that his crown remains the core authority of Westeros going forward. And today, I want to take a deep dive into that conflict, what it means for Westeros, and what I believe to be the scheme behind its initial plot. The Greyjoy Rebellion took place in the year 289 AC, 6 years following Robert's Rebellion and 9 years before the main series itself begins. And the origins of this conflict date back to Robert's Rebellion. Specifically, during that conflict, the Lord of the Iron Islands was one Quelyn Greyjoy. He very much took his time in deciding how he was going to play Robert's Rebellion, but ultimately he ended up siding with Robert and dying in the Battle of the Mander. But Quelyn was quite unique, especially for an Ironborn lord. He was very progressive and focused on integrating the Iron Islands into the wider picture of the Seven Kingdoms. He generally disagreed with the old ways of reaping and raiding, and just brought progress for the Iron Islands generally. His son and heir, Balon Greyjoy, was pretty much the exact opposite. He was very focused on these old ways, the ancient Ironborn traditions, and he believed that the Greyjoys were destined to be kings, not petty lords. We hear from George R. R. Martin himself that there were two key reasons that motivated Balon Greyjoy to pursue this rebellion. First and foremost, Robert's crown was not necessarily viewed as a stable one at this point in Westerosi history. He had just overthrown the Targaryen dynasty, which had been the force binding the realm into one nation. Before the Targaryens, these were all independent kingdoms, and now Robert has come in and is trying to manage this dynasty that was not his to begin with. It was unclear whether lords would rise up to support him in any armed conflict. And additionally, it was unclear to Balon whether or not Robert would have the strength at sea necessary to defeat the Iron Fleet. While there are some significant naval forces in and around Westeros, the Crown really does not have that many ships independently to itself, so he would have to call on those lords, who again would be questionable as to whether or not they would support his quashing this rebellion, as it could very much be kind of a bellwether trial for the overall Baratheon rule. I should state, Balon Greyjoy is not a smart guy, and this is not a good idea. Even if everything were to go exactly how the Iron Islands would hope that it would go, he is still in a losing position because the Iron Islands rely on raiding the lands around them, plundering resources, because these islands themselves cannot really support that much in the way of farmland or anything that would be conducive to an independent and thriving society that can rely on itself instead of taking things from those around them. So by necessity, they are going to come into more direct conflict with these lands around them, and at any of those points, they could end up being countered or having a larger scale war brought against them in the first place. And additionally, even if Robert isn't able to rally all of the Seven Kingdoms, there are a number of kingdoms he almost certainly could. He was very heavily allied with the Vale, the Riverlands, and the North, and he is the Lord of the Stormlands, so all of these, effectively half of the Seven Kingdoms, more than that, would back him no matter what. Those questionable kingdoms overall really wouldn't make the difference in this conflict if it's four of the Seven Kingdoms against just this tiny island chain with no resources. With that said, there's another way that this war can be viewed, and I think it makes a lot more sense. It's an idea that I haven't really seen discussed in any other places, but there are hints throughout the series that this rebellion was not necessarily sparked by Balon himself. Yes, Balon is the king for which the rebellion is named. Yes, he is the one making all the decisions, taking all of the actions here, but I think Balon might have been manipulated into pursuing this war, because I think if we're looking at the Ironborn generally, there is only one individual individual who is both known to have helped in the planning of this rebellion and benefits no matter what, regardless of the outcome, win or lose, for Balon and his heirs. Specifically, I think that Euron Greyjoy orchestrated his brother's rebellion back in 289 AC as a first bid for power in the Iron Islands. I also want to interrupt myself to ask for your feedback on this theory. Do you think Euron could have had a bigger role in the Greyjoy Rebellion than we know of? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, be sure to like the video, and I am on my way to 100,000 subscribers, and any assistance in getting there would be a huge help, and I'd really appreciate it. Back to the video. To start, I want to discuss Euron's potential motivation in doing this. I said he wins no matter the outcome. What do I mean by that? Well, regardless, win or lose, Euron is put in some better position than he would be otherwise. First off, if the Ironborn win this rebellion somehow, they are again kings of the Iron Islands. And no matter what, win or lose, it is likely that many people will die in the fighting. At the start of this war, King Balon has 3 male heirs who would undoubtedly succeed him as king or Lord of Pike. This war ends up killing 2 of them and getting the other warded in the north. So overall, that part of the plan is absolutely a win. And additionally, if they lose, it seems very likely that Balon Greyjoy would effectively be taken out of power at this point and replaced by someone else. His line might be attainted, so maybe it would go to the next in line, that being his brother Euron. We know that Euron is instrumental in planning this war, and I think that the way that he goes about it is quite interesting. Euron is the architect of the single victory for the Ironborn in this entire war, and it is not even a victory in battle. Specifically, he engineers this plan for his brother Victarion, a viewpoint character in the later books, to sail into Lannisport and burn the Lannister fleet. This is a good idea. The Lannisters would undoubtedly ally with the Baratheons, as Robert is then married to Cersei Lannister, so there is a pretty strong tie there, and the Lannister fleet would be the most immediately available to respond to an Ironborn rebellion. By burning them, it very much starts the war with a bang, creates this loud kind of symbol of rebellion, this victory for the Ironborn and sense of momentum initially, and things are off to a decent start there. But afterwards, the Ironborn don't win a single battle in this war, which I find quite interesting, because Euron does such a good job planning this incident. It does seem like such a big blow to the main naval force that is directly allied with the crown at the start of the conflict. At this point, early on in the war, it seems like Euron is kind of the brains of the operation. He is the person who engineered this first attack, and it's unclear whether or not he is kind of the mind behind Balon Greyjoy, because we know Balon has these ideals of the old way, and I do think he very much could be baited into starting a war by some of his closest advisors, which at this point likely include his brothers. Aeron is just kind of partying at this point, but Victarion and Euron are both kind of warhawks and would very much advance this cause. And it is worth noting that Euron is very much okay with getting his kinsmen killed. We hear that he has killed 3 of his brothers in the Forsaken chapter of the Winds of Winter, and he loves doing it. He just loves killing. It's insane. He just wants to see if the gods will strike him down for doing this taboo of kinslaying, and they never really do. And I think that starting this war to hopefully get his brother's line killed very much falls into that pattern for Euron. The next attack, and last offensive in the war by the Ironborn, falls against Seaguard, the seat of House Mallister, and it is led by the one and only Roderick Greyjoy, Balon's eldest son and heir. And at this point, if we are considering that Euron was leading the planning of the previous attack, I believe that he was probably leading the planning of this one as well, and Roderick probably wanted a chance to prove himself in battle. By sending Roderick out to his death, Euron is able to further cement his position. Balon's heir is now dead, and well, yes, he has 2 other sons. There is war now coming to the Iron Islands, and things might not go great for Balon's line going forward, as the first domino has already kind of fallen. It seems that these 2 battles were likely as far as Euron's planning and active participation in this conflict would have went, as from this point forward, the Ironborn are very much on the back foot. We get into the Battle of Fair Isle, where Stannis Baratheon, the Master of Ships for the Iron Throne, smashes Victarion Greyjoy and the Iron Fleet at sea. This is kind of both a victory and a defeat if we are considering it from Euron's perspective, because the Iron Fleet is a massive resource and something he would need if he were to want to seize power for himself, but Victarion Victarion losing is also very good. Victarion is kind of the platonic ideal of the Ironborn lifestyle, and him having this massive defeat in war very much makes him a less desirable candidate to rule them in the event of a future Kingsmoot, which does end up happening, or if there was some dispute over Euron's potential status as, the elder brother and clear heir to Baelin's fortune and lordly seat if they lose. The final conflicts of the war were the battle at Lordsport and the siege of Pike, which results in the death of the next heir to the Iron Islands, that being Baelin's second eldest son, Meryn Greyjoy, and then ultimately Theon Greyjoy is made a ward of House Stark. The conflict is brought to an end by Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon themselves, storming Pike and forcing Lord Baelin to bend his knee and surrender to the new king. Honestly, it is quite surprising that they don't kill Baelon here. I think it honestly might have been smart to do that, given Baelin rising in rebellion some years later, but overall it is a massive victory for the Iron Throne, and it does fully cement Robert's rule as the force to be respected in the Seven Kingdoms. He's not simply trying to imitate the Targaryen dynasty and just barely holding things together. He is a dynasty in his own right. Balin launching a rebellion some years later in a much worse political circumstance is interesting to me because it does speak to Balin's character and his ability to do things like this on his own, but ultimately he only sees that opportunity because Theon brings this letter directly to him, offering an alliance with Robb Stark, which he obviously rejects. It shows that Balin is very quick to rebel, but you need to bring him an opportunity to rebel first and foremost, because it doesn't seem like that was a thought in his head before Theon arrived. I think that this is very much shown in the Greyjoy Rebellion as well. There's no reason it would take 6 years between Robert's rebellion and then Balin rising up against the Iron Throne. He was made lord at the end of that rebellion. He could have done it right away, and that might have been a better time to rebel. But it seems 6 years later, someone might have brought him this chance to rebel, this idea that Robert's throne is weak, and that he should take the the Iron Price and do the old way thing and become king. This rebellion also seems to have served as something of a learning experience for Euron Greyjoy. He learned that the Iron Islands alone cannot stand against all of Westeros, at least in outright open conflict, a true war one against the other. He needs some sort of additional leg up, and the Euron that returns from exile, though he was not exiled as a part of this rebellion, he was exiled because of stuff with Victarion's wife that is quite bad, but regardless of that, he comes back obsessed with magic and prophecy and dragons, and the idea of securing this supernatural power in order to advance not only the Ironborn's stance in the world, but his own status as potentially a monarch of that world. And I think it very much seems to have shaped who this character became later on down the line, though given there are thoughts that Euron could have been a student of Bloodraven, given some of his musings in the Reaver chapter, I do think that there is at least some inkling of magic in Euron's head even earlier on before the rebellion. With massive events like the Greyjoy Rebellion, Martin likes to have layers to what they mean to the story, and I think we see that as we go through Ice and Fire. We initially see it as the most recent conflict, the thing that some characters are talking about, the war that was just fought that was giving Robert his true sense of power, rather than the rebellion being the only source of his authority and anything there. Additionally, we then get into the Iron Islands, we get Theon's direct perspective and the interesting ways that being a ward has impacted him. We get further into this with the Kingsmoot and the way that Balin's legacy is shaping those who are seeking to become king in his stead. And additionally, I think that if we consider this element of character development for Euron and this kind of testing grounds for the strategies he would later use to claim the Iron Throne for himself, I think that it very much makes sense, even if it is something that I don't see getting confirmed in a future book, simply due to amount of page space that we have and sheer volume of shit that Euron has left to do in the story. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it, and it does really help grow the channel. I have many more videos for you in the near future about A Song of Ice and Fire, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, House of the Dragon, and Game of Thrones, and I hope you will join me for all of those as we're getting into kind of the end zone here for Dunk and Egg, as the show is really coming up, and I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you'll stick around to just join me for all of the discussion of that.